When we think about the Second World War, our minds usually go to the big stuff. The tanks, the battleships, the bombers. But today, we're going to zero in on something smaller, but maybe even more important. We're talking about the rifle in the hands of the individual soldier. That single piece of steel and wood that, when you multiply it by millions, could decide the fate of an entire nation. This is about the tool that could be a soldier's best friend or his death warrant.
We are about to walk a very stark line between victory and total defeat as we rank the infantry arsenals of several key nations. It's a journey that's going to take us from some tragically obsolete designs that doomed armies from day one, all the way to some truly revolutionary weapons that became legends. We're going to see what really gave a soldier his edge. Okay, let's dive right in.
We're going to start at the absolute bottom of the ladder. We're talking about arsenals that weren't just a disadvantage, they were practically a guarantee of catastrophic failure. These are the nations that were sent to fight a modern war with the ghosts of weapons past.
Just try to picture this for a second. It's May 1940. You're a Dutch soldier, and pouring across your border is the most terrifying military the world has ever seen. What do you have in your hands? The Gear M95 rifle, a weapon that was designed before your own father was even born. Now, its straight-pull bolt was supposed to be fast, but in the real world, in the mud and the terror of combat, it was known for jamming, turning your only weapon into a useless metal club at the worst possible moment.
5. That's it. That's how many days the Netherlands managed to hold out. While German squads were laying down a storm of fire with their MG-34s and MP-40 submachine guns, the Dutch infantry were stuck with these turn-of-the-century bolt actions. It was less of a battle and more of a massacre, born from a massive gap in technology.
So next, let's look at Romania. Their problem wasn't just one bad rifle, it was a complete, self-inflicted wound of unbelievable incompetence. See, they had some modern weapons, but their ability to supply their own troops was an absolute catastrophe.
I mean, just look at this. This slide is a perfect picture of total chaos. Imagine you're a Romanian supply officer on the Eastern Front. You get a desperate call for more ammo. But for which rifle? You had some battalions trying to use 3 different, totally incompatible calibers all at the same time. A soldier's life could literally depend on getting the right box of cartridges, and that was a nearly impossible task. It crippled their armies before they even saw the enemy.
Okay, let's move up the ladder a little bit, to the nations where you had this strange mix of genius and fatal flaws living side by side. These are the stories of incredible potential that was tragically held back by history and circumstance.
So Hungary, much like the Dutch, was stuck with that old Mannlicher M95. On the Eastern Front, this wasn't just a flaw, it was a death sentence. In the freezing cold of the Russian winter, soldiers told stories of the bolts freezing completely solid. Imagine hearing that metallic click of a jammed rifle instead of a gunshot. For many, that was the last sound they ever heard. This one flaw contributed directly to the absolute annihilation of the Hungarian Second Army.
And then you've got the total paradox of Belgium. The engineers over at Fabrique Nationale, or FN, they were nothing short of geniuses. They created the Browning High Power, a pistol so advanced with its 13-round magazine that it stayed the standard for decades. Their automatic rifles were incredible. They basically held the blueprints for a world-class army.
But here's the crucial point, right? Genius on paper doesn't mean a thing if that weapon isn't actually in a soldier's hands. When Germany invaded, Belgium's rearmament was just dangerously incomplete. So for every squad that had a modern weapon, there were countless others still carrying rifles from 1889. The potential was huge, but the reality was a crushing defeat in just 18 days.
Okay, this is where the story starts to shift. Now we turn to nations that, when they were faced with impossible odds, didn't just fight back, they innovated. Through pure ingenuity, they came up with some surprising and honestly game-changing technology.
So Poland went up against the German invasion with a solid, reliable Mauser rifle. It was a good weapon, no doubt. But Poland's high command knew that was never going to be enough to stop German tanks. So, in total secrecy, their engineers created a weapon that would give a single infantryman the power to kill a tank.
This was the karabin Wzór-35. It was so secret that it was shipped in crates labeled medical equipment. Many Polish soldiers didn't even know what it was until the morning of the invasion. Can you imagine the shock of a German panzer crew all buttoned up in their steel tank, only to have it rocked by a high-velocity round fired by one guy from 300 meters away? It was a terrifying new reality on the battlefield.
And this right here really shows you its power. The secret was just physics.
It fired a tungsten core bullet at nearly twice the speed of sound. Now, it didn't just punch through the armor. The kinetic shock created something called spalling, which basically turned the inside of the tank into a storm of white-hot metal shards. Absolutely devastating.
Now, let's go half a world away, to the jungles of New Guinea. Australian troops, known as the Diggers, were fighting two enemies at once, the Japanese and the jungle itself. The mud and the rain could knock a weapon out of action just as easily as a bullet could. And out of this brutal environment, a true legend was born, a weapon they nicknamed the Digger's Darling.
This was the Owen submachine gun. In a now famous stress test, they took the Owen, the American Thompson, and the British Sten and buried them all in mud and sand. The Thompson and the Sten both jammed completely. The Owen, though, with its unique top-mounted magazine and a bottom ejection port that let gravity clear out all the filth, it was the only one that still fired. It was so trusted that soldiers would literally throw away other guns just to get their hands on one.
All right, let's move to the very top of our ranking. Here we find two nations that got to infantry excellence through two completely opposite ways of thinking. One mastered industrial might, and the other mastered tactical ingenuity.
Canada didn't enter the war as a designer of revolutionary new weapons. Instead, it became a master of production. It basically transformed its entire industrial base into a giant small arms factory for the British Commonwealth. It was truly the arsenal of the Allies.
Just think about this number for a second. Over 186,000. That's how many Brand light machine guns, which was arguably the best LMG of the entire war, were made by just one single company in Toronto. Every single Brand that rolled off that production line was a lifeline for Allied soldiers everywhere, from the beaches of Normandy to the deserts of North Africa. Canada's edge wasn't some secret weapon. It was the ability to produce excellence on a massive global scale.
And then, for the complete opposite approach, we look to Finland, a tiny nation facing the massive Soviet Union. They knew they could never outproduce their enemy, so they were forced to outthink them and outfight them. They captured thousands of Russian mosin-nagant rifles and with incredible craftsmanship rebuilt them into tools of terrifying precision.
The story of Simo Heiha is really the ultimate example of the Finnish philosophy. Using a standard-issue Finnish mosin with no telescopic scope, just the iron sights, he became the deadliest sniper in all of recorded history. This wasn't some kind of magic. It was the result of superior training, superior fieldcraft, and getting the absolute most out of the man, not just the machine.
But Finland's true stroke of genius was this: the Suomi KP-31 submachine gun. It was a revolution in firepower. With a blistering rate of fire and a huge 71-round drum magazine, Finnish ski troops became like ghosts in the snow, striking hard and then just vanishing, leaving total devastation behind. The Suomi was so incredibly effective against the Red Army that it actually forced a stunned Soviet command to develop their own iconic submachine gun, the PPSH-41, as a direct response.
So, here we are at the very peak of infantry effectiveness. On one side, you have Canada, the industrial titan, arming the free world through sheer production power. And on the other, you have Finland, the tactical innovator, holding back a giant with pure cleverness and precision. It really brings up a critical question. What's the final lesson here when we compare these two masters of their craft?
You know, the story of these weapons, from those obsolete rifles in 1940 to the battlefield-changing designs from Poland and Finland, it proves there really is no single answer. The ultimate edge is a razor-thin balance. It's about superior technology, yes, but also flawless logistics, uncompromising training, and that spark of human ingenuity you need to create the right tool for the right fight at exactly the right time.